Joined by Sarah Edwards as well from the Business and Trade Committee. Very welcome, Sarah, and I think you have a question on this topic.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm moonlighting here. The Business and Trade Committee, and obviously come and spoken to us, and thank you very much for that the other week. We've heard so much about the problems of energy rates, and we've gone around the country and heard that continuously, and I've had issues in my own patch to the point where I've now started crusading on this point because I think it's so damaging to our businesses. The point that I want to put to you today, though, is around a similar idea to, do we have a cap? But also with the fact that we've got completely unregulated brokers who are whacking huge profits in some cases on top of that kilowatt hour. If we capped the deemed rates when you move in to a property, because that, what do you think on that? Because what they're being used as is an artificial level to say, you're going to get a great deal from me, the energy supplier, because it's 10p less than the outrageous deemed rate that they're not supposed to be profiteering off, but they are. And then people are locking in to multiple years on that. And I know I've heard evidence, I'm sure you've got examples of that, and I just wondered, the suggestion here, and from the Energy Consultants Association I've been talking to, is that that would help to bring the baseline down across without necessarily needing a cap, although it's not to say that there aren't other ways, but that's one area that could work.
I couldn't agree more. I think absolutely when businesses move on into a supply company and they end up on deemed rates, those rates are excessive. We see behaviours which result in that period on those deemed rates, again, being excessive. And in some cases, the debt that exists at the end of that then means it's not sustainable, and that supplier then is able to retain that supply because you cannot leave a supplier under the current rules if you have debt outstanding, and the thing becomes a downward spiral. Right. So I absolutely think a cap on the cost of deemed rates and the duration and the circumstances in which they can be applied. I've had a great example recently where we had a business start at the back end of last year, moved in, applied for supply from the incumbent supplier. It took over 6 months, and that's partly because one of the things requested was a letter from a solicitor to validate that they actually were a legal occupier. They couldn't get that initially, it took time. That's one of the new RICO requirements. And at the end of that, they had a bill of £17,000 when it came through, and that was all charged out of contract rates at deemed rates. And during that time, they didn't receive bills. So, a bit like your example before, Paul, somebody find a small business fund, they've got a £17,000 bill at that point to pay. It's hard putting away cash to meet bills of that nature, and then of course you're left with a debt to that company and can't leave. And exactly as you say, I think that's a real area that needs attention and needs to be addressed.
Really helpful. Paul, what are your thoughts? Because you've probably got some examples as well.
So I completely agree. I think it's not an idea that we've come up with, but I think it's a very clever idea, and I think it would be helpful. When we saw a number of suppliers go bust during the energy price crisis, we saw a number of businesses moved on to deemed rates, and then they came under huge pressure to sign up to a long-term fix at a time when the market prices were very, very high. And because I think they came under that pressure, some of them signed deals that maybe they wouldn't have had to do if they'd have been able to take a bit of time and think about it. And they also signed those deals because then they would qualify for more government support. And what we then saw was the need for those businesses to go to suppliers and say, can we blend and extend those contracts because they're so uncompetitive at the moment. Some did a little bit around that, others didn't. So I think it is a really good idea from that perspective to avoid just being under the pressure to sign this fixed contract at a potentially not very good rate.
That's great. And Verity, you might have a slightly different